fight together, there's power when we organize. Power when we stand and fight together, there is power when we organize.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham.
Any protest got to go, hey, hey. Any protest got to go, hey.
Fast food workers and their supporters will rally in protest in 30 U.S. cities Thursday, protesting the nomination of Andy Puzder as labor secretary. The Fight for 15 workers movement says under Puzder's tenure as CEO, Carl's Jr. and Hardee's have been hit with more federal employment discrimination lawsuits than any other major U.S. hamburger chain. Fight for 15 says it's releasing a major announcement about Puzder's fast food company, CKE, as the protests unfold. Keeping the minimum wage low is so important to Puzder, he spent $10,000 of his own money to fight a ballot initiative in Nevada that would have raised the minimum wage at the time from $5.15 an hour to $6.15. The Thursday protests accused Puzder of stealing worker wages. Puzder makes more in a day than the average fast food worker makes all year. The Trump resistance is mobilizing in Bakersfield, California Friday at the congressional office of Republican Representative Kevin McCarthy, the House Majority Leader. Senior citizens, nurses, and Kern County residents will tell McCarthy to protect, improve, and expand Medicare, not cut it. Hundreds of people are expected at Representative McCarthy's Bakersfield, California office to speak up for Medicare. Dish Network is being ordered to reinstate 18 union-represented workers and to rescind unilateral changes in terms and conditions of employment at 2 sites in Texas. The National Labor Relations Board says Dish Network prematurely declared an impasse in collective bargaining to impose its conditions on the workers. The NLRB administrative law judge decision requires Dish Network to make the workers whole for any losses they incurred during the changes imposed on them by the company. That includes back pay. Dish Network must also return to the bargaining table with the Communications Workers of America. Earlier this month, U.S. District Judge Reed O'Connor granted a preliminary injunction against Dish Network, ordering the company to restore what the judge called drastic wage cuts at the 2 Dish Network facilities in Farmers Branch and North Richland Hills, Texas.
Brought to you in part by the Alliance for American Manufacturing, working to build coalitions between business, labor, legislators, and activists. Information about our mission to strengthen American manufacturing and rebuild the middle class through smart public policy is available online at americanmanufacturing.org.
WIN is brought to you in part by the Amalgamated Transit Union, the largest labor union representing transit and allied workers in the U.S. and Canada. Online at atu.org.
Workers Independent News puts workers and their unions on the national radio news airwaves every day. To help keep labor's voice on the air, go to laborradio.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. Oh my goodness. The ABC interview last night, pure Trumpian gold. Look, if I and maybe this is one of those alternative worlds that we evidently are living in. I don't know how any rational, thoughtful person looks at what they saw last night on ABC News with our president. Wow. I mean, that's all I could come away with was I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this and I'm watching this and I'm just thinking, really? This is our reality? Really? and as I'm sitting there watching it, I'm thinking that, you know, we live in such a polarized time right now. We live in because, you know, I guess I'm old enough to remember where you could have, you know, honest disagreements with people and you could have discussions around it and your ideas were you know, batted around. We now live in completely different worlds. Because here's the thing, you know, I watched that last night, and I'm sure a lot of people did and said, my goodness, what? Do we have really the dumbest, most thin-skinned president in the history of just can't let it go? Cannot accept winning? I mean, this is the bizarre thing, that it's not enough that he won. It has to be one on every front, and where he feels he didn't win is now, well, an obsession. You know, but here's the thing, and here's what bothers me. That interview played to the Fox News watching knuckle-dragging mouth breathers out there, you know, who are surrounded by the fake news propaganda all the time. And, you know, the thing is, our president included in that. They saw, and this is the thing that, you know, just kind of scares me. They saw somebody who they viewed as presidential. Someone who they viewed as, he's talking my language. That, wow. I mean, to be honest, I sat there going, this guy makes George W. Bush look like a genius. Because even Bush was not dumb enough to admit that waterboarding is torture. Not even Bush was dumb enough to say that. And for those who may not know, the argument has always been waterboarding is not torture. It's an enhanced interrogation tactic. It's not torture. But last night, we now have a president. And when I saw it, the first thing I thought was, Your Honor, Exhibit A at his Nuremberg trial. Because I used to think I guess we're going to make torture great again. I guess that's the goal here. Since we're making everything great again, maybe we're going to make torture great again. And we're not just going to do that sissy waterboarding. No. You know, we're bringing back all the hits from the past. Because look, in his speech, he said, look, you know, we're gonna fight fire with fire. And immediately I going, are we going to start chopping people's heads off? Is that what's coming next? I mean, how far does this go? If you're not going to take the high road, how low? Honestly, how low? How low do you go? And with this guy, I don't actually know. I think that he buys into, and one of the scary things that came out yesterday was, I think it was a Times reporter who had some conversation with him about that, you know, his schedule. He wakes up, you know, like 6 o'clock in the morning and immediately turns on, you know, it's fake news or a cable news channel so that he can tweet some angry stuff about it. So you know that's where he's spending all of his time. He doesn't read. And again, we knew that because he said, I don't do the daily briefing stuff because that entails, I don't know, reading. At least George Bush, again, I'm not saying Bush was a genius, but comparing, I'm not so sure. At least Bush got 2 pages, and he made his way through those 2 pages. This guy, nothing at all. If it's not on fake news or if it's not on cable, maybe it's not getting. And maybe this is where I think the resistance. I think people who are like me, who are not in favor of some of the policies that he's pursuing, maybe we start a cable news network. Since that's the only way he gets information, maybe we start a cable news network and we get into his ear. And I guess if you can get into his ear and you get him doing the Twitter thing, maybe you can then have policy talks with him and go, hey, Donald, since you're watching and tweeting, here's a good idea. Maybe making torture great again is not something the U.S. should be behind. Look, I don't want to see beheadings in town square any more than I think a lot of people do. But according to him, we're going to fight fire with fire. And we're going to, look, we used to say that, this kind of stuff, not something we wanted to do. We were high road folks. We're going to take the high road. Because understand, once you start going down we're going to fight fire with fire, it only gets worse. And the weird thing to me is every intelligence person that I've ever met, and I've asked, does torture work? They all say no. They all say, the information you get is highly unreliable because, well, people just want the torture to stop. So they'll tell you anything. What do you want to know? I'll tell you. Just stop. Yes, I killed Kennedy. I know where Hoff is at. I did it. Yes, me. But you weren't alive then. I don't care. Just stop. So we know it doesn't work. But according to him, and he said he's, during the little interview there, he said in the last 24 hours. And again, this is one of those things that scares me because this is probably the last person he talked to or the last thing he heard. And it could have been on talk radio. It could have been on cable news, or it could have been, the janitor, muttering to himself that, torture works. But according to him, people at the highest level of intelligence told him that, torture works. Absolutely, yes, it works. That's scary to me because here's a guy who, he's the president of the United States. He's not your crazy right-wing curmudgeon uncle sitting on the couch with a beer. This is the guy who now has the nuclear codes. This is a guy who can go, you know what? That's it. I've had enough. Torture's not working. Nuking them. That, again, very, very scary. And to be honest, lots of very scary things. The biggest one still being this voter thing. He still believes there's, or maybe he does, because in the same interview, he went from saying, yes, there's 3 to 5 million, illegal voting people, and to, well, we don't know if it's that high, to, well, I don't know anything, to, well, we're going to find out, to, well, I don't know. It's California and New York. We know that. It really was very twisted. And, and again, regurgitating the right-wing meme that there's all these dead people on the voter rolls. And there are. You know why? Because people die. And, no one seems to get that they don't go and vote. Look, after I die, if I can figure out a way to come back and vote, please let me know how to do it. But as far as I know, it's not happening. And neither do they. And that's the thing that's amazing. But understand what this is really about. Because all of this is a distraction. What this is really about, what this is really getting down to is what the conservative wet dream would really be here. Is that you have to register to vote for every election. That's the holy grail. That's what they want more than anything. They want yearly voter registration. You got to opt in every year. Because they know most poor and working class people are not going to be able to go through jump through the hurdles. They want to put back as many obstacles to voting as possible. Because they want rich, white, land-owning males over 21. That's who they want to vote. That's it. Because they know that that's their demographic. That's who's funding their campaigns. And if they can get to that, so great. But I looked at last night's thing, and I highly suggest it. It's not entertaining. It's scary that this is the guy who has his finger on the buttons, but it is very telling. And it's wow. So today we're going to get into some of the interview last night, which wow. I guess that's the best I can come up because there's so much. And it was a tremendous, brilliantly, tremendously wonderful, successful speech that was just tremendous. I don't know how many times you can use the word tremendous in an interview, but he did it. Slam dunk. It was tremendous. We're so screwed as a country. Look, I guess the good thing is the rest of the world is now going, we're all so screwed. Because I guess Germany lifted their ban against talking bad about foreign leaders just in time. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about billionaire Betsy. Evidently, some new revelations about her ethics forms, some conflict of interest, perhaps. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day that President Theodore Roosevelt signed into law an effort to get corporate money out of national politics. The law was called the Tillman Act. The act was named after its chief sponsor, Senator Benjamin Tillman of South Carolina. President Roosevelt had fallen under public criticism for taking corporate money in his 1904 run for office. After he won the race, he included the issue in his address to Congress. Teddy said, "All contributions by corporations to any political committee for any political purpose should be forbidden by law." The resulting Tillman Act covered national banks and corporations, but the act had no real enforcement provisions. Since the passage of the Tillman Act, Congress has moved to further regulate campaign financing more than 10 times. Labor union contributions were regulated for the first time during World War II. During the war, unions were strictly prohibited from direct political donations. During the 1944 election, for the first time, the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, set up a political action committee. The PAC was to support pro-labor candidates and legislation. 3 years later, however, limits on union political spending were beefed up even further by the Taft-Hartley Act. The role of corporations and unions in campaign finance continues to be a hotly contested issue. In 2010, the United States Supreme Court decided the landmark case Citizens United. Their decision ruled that money equals speech. Corporations and unions can spend as much as they want on elections as long as they don't coordinate directly with individual campaigns. This has led to a flood of money by very wealthy donors into super PACs. More than a century after the passage of the Tillman Act, we still have not solved the question of election financing.
Yes, it's fun by the elite academic types in America to say McDonald's is the wrong kind of food and it's the wrong kind of this and the jobs don't pay very much and so forth. I have quite a different view. I think McDonald's is one of the most successful educational institutions in the United States. They take people and give them a first job, which enables them to get a second job. They do a very, very good job of educating troubled young people to be good citizens. And they're probably more successful than charter schools.
Yes, the billionaire class hath spoken. McDonald's is a much better educational institution than public schools, than even those charter schools. Because, look, those people need jobs. And, look, this is the mentality of the wealth class of this country. We get for our children what we want, small class sizes, none of that standardized testing stuff, experiential learning, all the good stuff that we know that works. It's going to create a well-rounded child with critical thinking skills and, all of that stuff that I think every parent wants for them. For you, manual labor tasks, to clean up after us and to serve us our food. That's really what you're getting. And I look at billionaire Betsy DeVos, Amway, just born into wealth, telling us now, well, I now know better. Never been in a classroom, never really done anything with education. Now she's going to lead the Department of Education, an ideologue, much like Munger there. And here to talk a little bit about that, I've asked Mary Botteri to come talk with us. She is the director there at the Center for for Media and Democracy, the deputy director. Mary, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So I look at billionaire Betsy, one of the billionaire class folks who thinks now that she was born into just amazing wealth. She knows it all, and, well, she's got the plan for public education, huh?
She does, and her local hometown paper there in Michigan, the Detroit Free Press, has editorialized against her. They're saying she's not an educator; she's basically a lobbyist. And at prwatch.org today, we put up an article about some other things that Betsy does. I mean, we knew already that she was a privatizer of public education because she's been deeply involved in the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, producing their cookie-cutter bills to privatize educational services across the country. And we also knew she was like a complete religious zealot because we published transcripts of her in meetings behind closed doors, sort of saying she wants to advance this education agenda because she wants to advance God's kingdom. I mean, just very weird, unusual language. But then what we didn't know until she released her ethics form on January 20th, actually Inauguration Day, so nobody was really paying attention, that she herself and her many companies her family is associated with and the many foundations her family is associated with have financial ties to all sorts of education firms. She's going to have to divest from over 100 education firms, and one of them involves financial ties to a college debt collection firm. So it's sort of like the lowest of the low of these types of firms. It's ridiculous.
Well, I guess where we're heading then down the road is because, I've been saying that the Trump administration is going to bring us payday lending for infrastructure. So basically, payday lending for education, too.
It was unbelievable. I took a look at this firm, and I quickly found on various websites, Better Business Bureau website, the Consumer Financial Protection website, that this company has a reputation of dogging people for loans that they don't owe, sort of either getting the name wrong or getting the amount wrong or getting the person wrong or whatever they're doing, but really pestering people for loans that they don't know, or pestering their family members, or calling them or their family members at work, or these kinds of things is the reputation of this company. But in addition to that, she is invested in a whole bunch of other companies that privatize education around the edges, like companies that provide parking and laundry services or administrative services to colleges. She also has some relationship with this group KinderCare. You see those little KinderCares all across the country.
Yeah.
They're really little schools for young people, and were started by Michael Milliken. You remember the junk bond king of the 1980s, and he went to prison for a long time? Well, he came out of prison, and a light bulb went off for him. He decided that education was where the money was, and that he was going to help privatize educational services and make a fortune. Well, she's invested in that kind of Wall Street, swindle. So
from junk bond king to kindergarten cop.
Kindergarten cop, or something. So anyways, it's a real shame that this ethics report did not come out before her hearing. Senators should have been given an opportunity to ask a whole bunch of questions about this. She has pledged to divest from these companies, But I think an exploration of these companies, their records for family investments, there's multiple family foundations here, and some of those family foundations are involved in supporting for-profit colleges. Now, we know that the for-profit college industry can be a real swindle. Sometimes it really doesn't work for young people, that they cram kids in there just to get their college Pell Grant, and they ship them out the other side without ever having graduated. Look no further than Trump University.
That's what I was immediately. That's what I was thinking. So, again, I've been saying for a very long time, the oligarchs have now taken over our government. The billionaire class now in full control of the levers, and this is another example of that. I mean, someone who is not an educator, someone who doesn't believe in public education, but has she profited off of the destruction of it?
And, I've watched a lot of these hearings because it's part of my job. Most people are not forced to suffer this way. But her hearing was really sort of gobsmacking. Her lack of knowledge on a lot of basic issues, for instance, what is a federal law versus what is a state law when it comes to civil rights for disabled kids. Her lack of knowledge over and over again was really apparent. It was one of the least impressive performances, if not at the bottom of the rung, of all of these hearings, and many of them were, quite bizarre and quite controversial, like the Jeff Sessions hearing. So,
right. But here's the thing, Mary, and this is the thing that is not surprising, that she doesn't really know anything about the job. That seems to be the first qualification. Do you know anything about what you're going to be doing? No. Great. You're it. That seems to be how Trump chose these people.
It was ridiculous. So, Elizabeth Warren, who is one of the bright lights in the Senate, I mean, she's just so unbelievably smart, asked her a whole series of questions. She was the only one who asked about higher education, because Elizabeth Warren used to be Professor Elizabeth Warren, and she taught at Harvard Law School. She was also very involved in protecting consumers during the consumer financial, the consumer meltdown, or the Wall Street meltdown in 2009, and helped form the Consumer Protection Agency. Well, Elizabeth Warren goes to her, let me ask you, I'll be the only person, because I only have 5 minutes, to ask you about higher education. She said, Department of Education is in charge of $150 billion we invest in students each year, and we have to get that money into the right hands. And it's basically a giant bank, for students. And she goes, do you have any direct experience in running a bank? And DeVos said, no. Have you ever managed a $1 trillion loan program? No. Have you ever managed a $1 billion loan program? No. And yet, Elizabeth Warren didn't have in her hands the ethics report at the time that would have shown her that she has experience in higher education with her financial ties to a debt collection agency. Just the wrong kind of experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the kind that screws students over instead of actually helping them. But isn't that really the point here, though? I mean, at the end of this, it's about tearing down the institution and then putting it into the hands of the privateers and the profiteers, like the people that she's invested in?
Well, President-elect, or President Trump now, sorry, I have to change how we refer to him, has said that he wants to help the working people of this country. And there's nothing more important to the working people of this country than economic opportunity and education and jobs.
Right.
And so to put someone so controversial in such an important office is really, it helps no one. It helps no one. Bernie Sanders was out there campaigning for free public institution college degrees and technical college degrees. Secretary Clinton was out there saying some similar things. And here we have someone who wants to go entirely in the opposite direction. She wants these to be private, unaccountable institutions that heaven knows what kind of damage can be done under this administration. And maybe there's still time to stop her if people get involved.
Well, the hope is and I know Chuck Schumer came out, I guess it was yesterday in Philadelphia, and said that he's going to vote against her because, and if I remember the quote right, that she's going to be the basically the worst possible choice, and she's going to be devastating. Her plan to privatize education, he said, would deprive students of a good public education while helping students from wealthier families get another leg up. He said he was proud. He'll be proud to vote against her. And I'm going, wow, finally a Democrat that gets it.
No, that's true, because her agenda for everyday schools, for K through 12 schools, is vouchers. And what vouchers mean is taxpayer monies tagging along with the kid, and that means they could be used. I mean, what the world that Betsy would like to see is every kid has a taxpayer voucher. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor or in between, and you can use it for the schools that you want. What this really means, it sounds attractive in one way, but what it really means is that the wealthy will be subsidized for sending their kids to private schools.
Right.
We'll be using public money for religious schools. So many state constitutions bar this, but here in the state of Wisconsin, we lost that lawsuit. We have voucher schools of all sorts of religions popping up, fly-by-night schools popping up, and this money going to these schools with little accountability. And that's the world she wants to see. And we know that once you start doing that kind of thing, voters have voted it down every time it's been put to the ballot, because voters have a lot of concerns about kids running off to one school or another school, or resegregation happening in the community, or certain community schools just being totally left behind. So instead of lifting all boats, there'll be like one school somewhere in the community, and out in the rural areas it'll be horrible.
Right.
Rural areas don't have these kinds of schools all over the place, school diversity.
No, and really, I think you hit it on it earlier, that really the thought behind this is to create little ideological schools, Christian warriors, the whole quiverful folks, and really to then fund a lot of the homeschooling, so that, because I know a homeschooler who says, it's coming eventually, because they have like 100 kids. Eventually, we're going to get like 10 grand for each kid to educate them at home, and that will be our job. And I'm going, really? You think that? I see someone like DeVos, you go, yeah, evidently that is coming.
I think that she's going to push for it. There's going to be a lot of barriers. For instance, the U.S. Constitution or the Constitution of many of these states. It will be difficult for this agenda to move forward for religious schools across the country. But for other schools, they might find more ways of doing it. So, as I've said, every time that kind of school voucher model has been put to voters, it's been voted down.
Yeah.
Voters are very concerned about it.
Which is why we're not going to do that. We're going to ram it through, and we're going to pack the courts with ideologues, and it's going to be great. It's going to be brilliant. We're going to have